All right, everybody, get ready because today we are getting granular and going deep on Japanese Keigo.
Keigo.
That's right, Keigo.
The Japanese honorific system.
Yes, exactly.
Which everyone finds so very tricky.
Learners do find it really difficult.
It's one of those things that...
It's tricky.
Yeah, it's really tricky. And I think even for people who've been studying Japanese for a while...
Absolutely.
It's something that people get tripped up on.
You're always learning with this one.
Yeah.
And we got a lot of great questions from listeners about this one. So
yeah.
I'm excited to dig in.
Me too.
So I guess like the first thing to say is just like, what is the big deal with this Keigo?
Right. Why should we even care?
Yeah. Why should we even care?
Why is this important? Well, you said it in the intro. It's the honorific system. And that, I think, is really the key to understanding why it's important.
Okay.
Because it's not just about, politeness. It's really a reflection of how important respect and social harmony are in Japanese culture.
Okay. So it's like, I'm trying to think how to, because I know we have a lot of language learners listening, right?
Right.
How would I explain this concept to someone who's like just starting out? Like they just cracked open their first textbook.
Okay, yeah. So I think a good way to think about it is imagine you're speaking to different people, right? Yeah. So you talk to your boss differently than you talk to your friend.
All right.
And you talk to a stranger differently than you talk to your family, and so on. Yeah. It's like choosing the right outfit for the occasion.
Yeah.
You wouldn't wear a ball gown to the beach, right?
Right. And it's funny you should say that because one of the things I read when I was sort of like prepping for this, someone had said, and I thought this was a really cool way to put it, it's about, they said, choosing the right spice. Okay.
For the dish.
For your dish.
Yeah.
So I thought that was really,
I like that.
It was like a very visceral way to put it, that depending on the level of formality, it's almost like you're adding a dash of this or like.
That's a great analogy. I like that.
I'm going to use that.
Oh, okay, great. Glad I could be of service.
Yeah.
So we've got these questions. I think maybe a good place to start is with, the source material we have mentions 3 main types of Keigo.
Okay.
Sonkeigo, Kenjugo, and Tigago. And I think for a lot of learners, myself included, it's like, okay, which one is which again?
Right, right.
So how do we tell them apart? How do we make them stick in our brains?
Right. Well, I think going back to that dinner party analogy, maybe, let's say you're hosting a dinner party.
Okay.
Sonkeigo is how you would talk about the guest of honor.
Okay.
Right.
So it's very elevated.
It's very elevated, respectful language that you're using to talk about that person. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, Kenjugo is more like you're the host of the party.
Okay.
You're being humble about yourself.
Got it.
You're being humble about your efforts.
Okay.
And your actions, particularly when speaking to someone of a higher social status, like the guest of honor, right?
Okay.
The Tanigo is kind of like the general air of politeness that you use with everyone at the party. Okay, got it.
Just to make sure everyone feels comfortable.
Okay, so it's like
if it's your friend, you're probably going to be using more Tainigo.
Got it.
And then, Kenjugo is, I think, a little trickier because it's very context dependent.
Okay.
But just remember, if you're talking about yourself and you want to be humble, that's when you're going to use Kenjugo.
Okay, and is there anything, I know, and we're not going to get too deep into the weeds here because that could be a whole other episode.
Right.
But are there any little cheats that our listeners can keep in mind? Like, for example, I know that in Japanese verbs, conjugate differently.
Right.
Depending on the level of formality.
Right, exactly.
So are there certain things like that or like if I see this means this level of formality?
Absolutely. Yeah. So there are specific verb forms, there are honorific prefixes that you can use.
Okay.
And even entirely different vocabulary that's used in Keigo. So one quick example.
Great.
If you're offering someone tea to your boss using Sonkeigo, you might say, "Uchu ocha wo duzo."
Uchu ocha wo duzo.
Right, and that translates to, please have some tea. But notice we're using the respectful prefix bu for boss.
Okay.
And we're using a very formal verb form, duso.
Got it.
Now with your friend, you might just say casually, ocha nomu, which is just like, want some tea?
Right, and and this is embarrassing, but I think it really illustrates just how important this is.
Right.
I was at I think it was like a bakery or a convenience store.
Okay.
And I was trying to be very polite. I was trying to use my Japanese, and I'm sure I got it all wrong.
Yeah.
But I was trying to be very polite to the cashier. And I could just see on her face, she was like, what is this? What is happening right now?
Yeah. And I think a lot of learners, especially when they're first starting out, they want to be so polite.
Right.
They end up overusing Keigo.
Oh, interesting.
And then it just sounds really unnatural.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So it really is. I love this idea of the dance, right? It's like learning the steps
It is. It's like a dance. Yeah.
and knowing, okay, this step goes here and not there.
Right. And you don't want to step on anyone's toes.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. So just like any language, it takes practice.
It does for sure.
It takes practice. It takes listening to how other people are using it.
Mm-hmm.
And it takes making mistakes.
Yeah. And being okay with
And being okay with making mistakes.
Right, because I think, and this is something that, and we've talked about this on the show before, this idea that like a lot of times language learners, we get in our own heads, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
We're so worried about making a mistake that we don't say anything at all.
Right.
And I think in the case of something like Keigo, if you're trying your best,
People will appreciate it.
people will. They'll cut you some slack,
I will.
They're not going to, I mean, I'm sure there are some people who'd be like, what is this person doing?
Yeah.
But I think for the most part.
Right. But I think for the most part, as long as you're showing that you're trying to be respectful and that you're trying to follow the cultural norms, I think people are going to be very understanding.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I guess like if there was like one big takeaway that our listeners could take away from this episode, what would you say it is?
I would say don't be afraid to dive in and start using Keigo.
Okay.
Even if you're not sure if you're using it perfectly,
Mm-hmm.
the most important thing is to show that you're making an effort
Okay.
and that you're trying to be respectful.
Great advice as always.
Thank you.
And I think on that note, we should probably wrap it up.
Yeah, I think so too.
So for you, the listener, I hope this was helpful. I know it was for me.
Yeah, me too.
And, until next time, keep practicing, keep listening, and most importantly, keep having fun with Japanese.
Absolutely. Have fun.
Great. And we'll talk to you all soon.
See you next time.